Welcome to Teachers Talk Money, where a millennial high school teacher and a Gen X elementary teacher get together to talk all things money.
From salary scales to saving, investing, and self-care, we're here to help teachers master their money. I'm Christy.
And I'm Rachel, and we're so glad you're here. Hey listeners, welcome back to Teachers Talk Money. We are so glad you're here. How are you doing, Christy?
I'm doing really well, Rachel. It's awesome to be back for another week.
Yeah. Do you have any updates for us this week?
Well, I do, and it's kind of a heavy one, but it's also really, really important and exciting. I have taught, for a long time to where the children I first started out with are now adults. Mm-hmm. And I taught first and second grade for most of my career. And I had Brenna and Andrew, who were brother and sister, and they were with me each for 2 years since I had first and second graders. And their mom was just amazing. She was young, she was an artist, she was in school. I just loved the entire family. And when Andrew was a second grader, they were actually all in a really bad car accident, and their mom didn't make it. And they were both relatively physically unharmed. So it was one of those moments in my career where it just transcended everything. It was so hard and painful and so full of grief, obviously for them and then for me as well. And we made it through. And the beautiful part of it is, the longer story is that now Brenna and Andrew are both adults and I'm still in touch with them. And it's just such a special, special relationship to know that I got to go through that with them and that I'm still kind of there as an adult in their life. And so I've just been in touch with them both recently. We kind of come in and out as their lives change and they move and they grow. And it's just one of those parts of teaching that you can't even put into words how special and important it is sometimes with those kiddos in their lives. And as hard as it was, I'm really glad I got to be there with them and still get to be there for them. And I asked them if I could talk about it during this episode, and they were like, sure. So Brennan, Andrew, love you tons. And I'm just so grateful for you in my life.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and the listeners. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it was. I'm shaky right now talking about it because it was just so raw, and it still kind of is. But yeah, it was really, I think probably once in a career, hopefully no more than that, we have to handle a tragedy like that with a student, and it's pretty powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I don't really have too many life updates, but I did want to share just some thoughts I had about a YouTube comment that I got recently. I made a comment in one of my videos about how I only track the contributions that I make to my pension. So literally just exactly what I put in for my paycheck. And I don't track any of the interest it earns because I'm planning to retire early. So it might make more sense to just withdraw the contributions and reinvest them versus face the penalty for retiring before 25 years of service.
Right.
So, which it's kind of complex, and there's a lot of in between gray area. There might be a certain point where it makes sense for me to take the penalty and then still get the annuity, but just a smaller version. It's very complicated, but to be conservative with it, I just track the contributions because that's all I really want to bank on having when it comes to early retirement. Right. And so a subscriber wrote to me. He said, "Why do you want to retire before getting your pension? You will be giving up a lifetime annuity if you don't work long enough to get your pension." And it kind of struck me because he's not wrong. That's exactly the trade-off that I'm making or might theoretically in the future make, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not getting that payment each and every month or whatever frequency it comes in. But it was just so surprising to me because it's I think it represents this fallacy that a lot of us have about missing out, especially when it comes to money things. I think we're so afraid of missing these opportunities. But when I think about what I would be giving up to get that lifetime annuity, it could be 10 years of work, really. I mean, with the numbers and how they are right now, obviously, barring any complications, that would mean a difference of 10 years continuing in the traditional workforce. So yeah, I would be missing out on that annuity. But the whole point of financial independence is to set yourself up to not have to rely on these systems that require you to basically trade in years of your life doing that same one traditional career. So it just kind of made me wonder, like, why would you care more about missing out on an annuity that you don't need versus missing out on 10 years of being able to really truly spend your days exactly as you see fit? Now, obviously, I really like teaching at the time of recording this, but I don't know. Like, I just think it's kind of silly to be like, well, stay there for 10 years because that's how you're going to get the most money, when I'm not really aiming to accumulate the most money ever that I possibly can. I'm aiming to give myself freedom and options. So I just thought it was interesting because it's something I've heard before. And I shared this on Instagram, and a couple of teachers responded saying things like, you know, my mom is telling me to pick the district I want to stay in forever so that I can make sure that I get this pension, but I don't know if I want to decide where I'm going to live and work forever. Like, that's a huge decision on my shoulders right now. And so it's really freeing that you shared this story about trying to be independent of those things. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with our listeners too.
Yeah, I think it's such a delicate balance between those options, you know, and especially now as a lot of states are pushing further out how many years you have to work to get that full pension, that this kind of question and conversation is something teachers really need to be having so that we do know that trade-off we're making and we're either totally good to go with it and signed up for it, or we're saying, okay, is there a way I can work this a little bit so that I have more options? Because it just really depends on your family size and your, you know, what you want to do and where you want to be. Like you said, you know, it's hard to pick. I've gotten really lucky that I've literally been in the same room for 20 years.
That's crazy.
It's weird. Everyone else has moved rooms but me. So yeah, I think it's an important conversation to keep having, because especially as those retirement pension requirements change, we really need to know what we're signing up for and what it's going to take. And then if we want to do something different, be planning accordingly like you're doing. So I think it's awesome.
So let's transition into the actual content of this episode, which is not about pensions or anything like that. But we are going to be talking about creating that beautiful, comfortable, safe space in your classroom while trying to think of all the best options you have to do it as cost effectively as possible.
Yeah, and this is such a huge part of being an educator, especially for newer teachers, but even as a veteran teacher, I'm always making changes. So, you know, just like side hustling, just like all the other things we talk about, we don't encourage people to spend a ton of money on their own classrooms. And of course, we wish districts and communities and all of the powers that be would fund everything that we need to build a classroom environment that is ideal for our students. So we're always going to be advocating for those things. And we have some really great resources actually coming up. But the truth is that teachers do end up spending money on our classrooms. And so we really want to address that because, again, it's kind of a truth, whether we like it or not, and talk about some really exciting and creative ways to make it happen and still preserve your budget.
Totally. And so we found a couple bits of data. This one's a little bit older. It's from the 2012 to 2013 school year. But according to the Education Market Association, teachers spent a total of $1.6 billion on classroom supplies, which is, if you sit down to really think about how big that number is, it is pretty breathtaking.
Yeah. And then in 2019, according to the Economic Policy Institute, the average teacher spent $459 out of pocket. 9 out of 10 educators are not reimbursed for those expenses, and teachers in high poverty areas spend more than teachers in affluent areas.
Yep, of course. As with everything, those inequities are just, the gap is just increased and increased when it comes to every single one of these issues. And we all know that when you show up to your classroom and there's desks, chairs, and minimal technology, you know that you need to do more to create that inviting, exciting, learning environment that is going to be the best possible environment you can create for your students.
Yeah. And it's kind of like step one for me, and the truth is that many of us do have to spend money on our classrooms or even want to. I mean, I follow a lot of Instagram teachers that are so excited, and of course, Pinterest, to make their classrooms this amazing space. And it's kind of their hobby within their profession. And so we don't, want to discourage that at all. If it's something you're excited and passionate about, absolutely. And we're just excited to talk about like how to do it without breaking the bank. So Rachel, what's been your experience with classroom design?
Yeah, it's been, kind of different every year. My first year teaching, I was super hardcore about getting out of debt. That's really the phase of my financial movement that I was in. And I was still very much holding tight to that frugal mindset. So I spent very little on my classroom. I think I spent about $30 total, and pretty much all of it was at Five Below because they had a ton of cheap, like substantial things. Like I got a small rug from them, a tapestry, and a knit blanket to throw over like the table that I have in my classroom. So these almost definitely were not sustainable or ethical purchases. You can tell that based on cost alone. But I was not that informed about those things back then. And I was kind of just, again, the cost was the main consideration that I put into purchases because that was sort of the frugality mindset that I had adopted from my upbringing. And then I made a lot of stuff. I made a lot of posters myself. I have some basic hand lettering skills, and I got some hand-me-down white holiday lights from my mother. So I was able to like get that soft lighting that's really nice. And I was able to make some posters that said things that I really wanted, versus sort of getting these hand-me-down posters that you're like, is that really that important to put up on my wall? And I think, fortunately, I also had a very minimalist philosophy about classroom decor because I'm personally a minimalist. And I remember this spiel that a veteran teacher that I know in my personal life once went on. She told me this story about how she used to have posters covering her classroom walls about everything the kid would need, right? How to write a thesis statement, showing versus telling, punctuation rules, other key messaging, just like, encouraging or inspiring quotes or whatever. And then she realized that the kids never read the posters. They would ask questions and she'd point to a poster and be like, that's been hanging up this entire year. But it was because there were so many posters. There was so much flooding of information that it was really too much for the kids to take in a meaningful way. And this really taught me that while it might be your instinct to want to cover every inch of your classroom, I think in most cases, less is more. Sometimes a more calm environment is more meaningful than having all those key skills on the posters. Or maybe you just create or buy posters that have the most key skills and key messaging, the quotes that you truly want to instill in students or the skills that you really want students to refer to that poster to see. I think that can be a lot better than just having everything under the sun and then not having them really read or think about any of it that deeply because there's just literally so much.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience, except first of all, my handwriting is terrible. I mean, not terrible, but it's nothing I would put up on a wall. So props to you for having created some of those things. But same thing, I created so many posters and hung up so much and then realized like nobody is reading that. And so I have developed a very similar stance towards it of just that less is more. In the beginning, I was also, like I mentioned in an earlier episode, literally making my own clothes, which I was super proud of. But I was in that frugality stage as well. And it was kind of like a treasure hunt to go to garage sales and accumulate, a lamp and a chair. And, it was so exciting. I was so proud to have my own classroom. And while that worked, eventually I had sort of a mismatched hodgepodge group of stuff that didn't feel cohesive and intentional. And then at the same time, where I started teaching, I was in a very competitive environment. And the teachers I worked with would literally make original artwork for their bulletin boards every month.
Oh my God.
I mean, oh my gosh, they were beautiful. But I was like, I am barely breathing here, like I cannot do this. I cannot keep up. And so I felt so much less than because they'd had 30-year careers to design all these gorgeous pieces of art they hung up every month. And so I, made a lot of posters, but found that kids were not using them the way I wanted them to. And over the course of my career, that's come into me just being very intentional. And really for me, it was, I realized that I'm spending an enormous part of my life in my classroom. Like the majority of my waking hours during my work years, are in my classroom. And I really wanted it to be a comfortable, functional space for me and for my students. So I wanted to design it in a way that there was really good traffic flow and that there were no like pain points where things were not organized and they were all piled on top of each other. And while the colors all were cohesive. And so I have ended up spending more money later on, but then it lasts for years and years and years and years. And along kind of what you said, Rachel, I really try to incorporate my values into my classroom design. So you won't see a lot of laminated materials, a lot of single-use plastic or disposable items in my room. The amount of waste 1 year of elementary school learning can generate is off the charts. And those trinket type purchases and those disposable items add up financially. And then I also just felt like, oh my gosh, they touched that plastic spoon once, and now it's thrown away forever. Or those bouncy balls I gave them, they're all under the tables by the end of the day and no one even is paying attention to them. So I really have tried to build it intentionally and make something that works really well and that's a very comfortable space. And that also we are being very intentional about our impact environmentally too. The other interesting thing I found is that something will drive me nuts all year long. I'll complain about it in my head and I will have no solution to it until right before school starts the next year. It's like, I won't have the time or the mental energy or the just ability to like stop and move things around. So that's why we wanted to put this episode out right now before the school year starts and right as the school year is starting, so that if you have those moments where you're like, where these books are is just not convenient at all, or the way I'm storing these headphones, they're just tangled constantly. So we're hoping that we can really intersect that with some solutions and some resources that can help solve some of those pain points at a point when we actually have time to solve it. And this year I'm excited for time to either get back to the old way of doing things or adopt some of the COVID changes in a more permanent way, because last year my classroom just felt like it was such a mess because of all the COVID protocols. And so I'm excited to kind of get in there and make it work for whatever is staying and whatever I can go back to using. So I would say kind of the most recent change I've made is that a few years ago, I painted all my furniture, which don't do that without asking first, because that can be a big no-no to paint district property. I sewed new pillows. I got new fabric for my bulletin boards. And that was my first update in probably 12 years. And I didn't break the bank doing it. And even then last year with COVID, I ended up getting so many cool resources for $0. So we're super excited to jump in and tell you how we did it.
Yeah, so we collected a ton of resources, some of them that we personally have experience, but we also surveyed our Instagram followers to see what other teachers had used. So we're just going to jump into all of these resources that can help you kind of create this budget-friendly classroom. And the first one, which Christy is going to talk a bit about because she's got some experience with it, is Donors Choose.
This is such an awesome site. I did not know about it until last year, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like magic. So it allows you to create a classroom project. So you basically get a wish list of things that you'd like to fund for a specific classroom project, and then any donor anywhere in the country can fund it. To date, almost 2 million classroom projects have been funded through Donors Choose. It's a nonprofit, and it's got the highest ratings from charity review organizations in terms of how they use their money and how much of their money actually goes to the projects that are on the site. It's founded by a high school teacher named Charles Best after he taught for 2 years and saw that there was such a high need in schools. And he knew that if the people he knew in his life could see what was really needed, they would be super excited to donate to those projects. And it could be a really powerful way to get classrooms connected with funds out in the community. So last year was COVID. And I was like, well, I'm not asking parents for a dime, people are hurting last year. And it was like, there was no way. Even parents that begged me to do things, I was still like, nope, we're good. And then Donors Choose came across my plate, and I was like, well, I don't know, I'll give it a whirl. So I literally went in and made a project for $250 to have more seating accommodations for my kids since they had to spend more time in their chairs, along with some art supplies that would help my kids create artwork that was more racially and multiculturally appropriate. And I was clicking around. I was like, oh, I want that and that and that. And I was like, $250. There's no way this is going to get funded. Like, I felt like I was asking for $200 million. And in less than 48 hours, and I did not share this with parents at my school, in less than 48 hours, the entire project was funded. And I got a $50 and a $75 gift card to apply to my next project. And I was like, did that really just happen? Like, I just got $250 of awesome materials to help my students be more comfortable and engaged in the classroom. And so then the year kept going, and I was like, well, all right, I'm taking this anti-bias training, and I've really wanted to diversify my classroom library a little more. Maybe I'll try another Donors Choose project. And I went in and I was like, okay, there's like $290 in new books I would love. And again, I was like, okay, this one I'm really going to have to like see if I can promote it a little bit, but I still didn't want to send it to parents.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours, every single book was purchased.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up a Donors Choose after this episode.
I was like, there's corporations that jump on there and match donations. And then it's, the donors can get on and pick the projects they want to fund. So setting up a new project takes a bit of work. And you do write a thank you note and you post pictures, but that's all to me like really meaningful things to ask when you're asking for someone help, for financial help with your classroom. And the way it works is Donors Choose is linked to several educational websites. So you create your project and then you go to those sites through Donors Choose and add things to your cart. But then when you check out, it just adds it to your Donors Choose project. And then that's what people can see. And so they can see exactly which books they're buying or exactly which, seating options they're buying. And so they know the impact that they're having in your classroom. It's like the best thing ever.
Yeah, that's really cool. I had heard of it before, but I had never really like gone in and done my own. And I think that is super awesome, especially for those classroom libraries, because books can be really pricey and you want to have stuff that's current and, like you said, diverse. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So let's get into some other resources, because of course, even if you do set up a Donors Choose project, there's a chance it might not get funded, or maybe you're just on a tighter timeline or you want a quicker fix of something you can do that's budget friendly for your classroom. So we collected a couple more ideas as well.
Yeah, one of my very favorites, because the Donors Choose options are limited, right? Like you can only shop through the stores that they are working with. So if you have other needs, one of the coolest accounts that I love to follow is the Superhero Teacher. She's Brittany Jeltma on Instagram, and she is a classroom design genius. She does like classroom makeovers that are to die for. But she focuses on inclusivity and creating classrooms where every child is represented and welcomed. And on her blog, she has a ton of gorgeous, inspiring, free posters that you can download. And then you might need to pay a couple bucks for color printing, but quick, easy, beautiful, those simple messages that we were talking about at the beginning, she's a great source to go to. And we'll link those in the show notes.
Yeah, and I saw that you had added her to our episode script today too, but I had also had a couple of teachers respond to my Instagram story asking for ideas with her account as well. And it is just, I actually downloaded some of her free posters when I went to check her out. And really, it just inspired me to DIY some, because I was like, I could actually make this on Canva. I don't know if our listeners, I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but Canva is a website. It's really awesome. They actually have a lot of stuff that's great for teachers. Like they have lesson plan templates, or if you're having your kids write a book or a movie review, they have templates for assignments and stuff, which is pretty cool. So there's actually quite a bit there. I use it mostly for Teachers Talk Money stuff. That's how I make my Instagram posts. But I went on there and I looked at some of their poster templates, and I found templates that I liked and just added quotes or key messaging or key skills to them. And they're beautiful. And I literally cannot wait to figure out how to get them printed in color and just hang them up on my classroom wall.
You're so like, I love that. You're like, oh, I can just make some on my own. Whereas
Yeah,
I'm like, no, I can't.
Well, I have to
Click,
say,
click.
Canva makes it so easy. I'm not sponsored, but I should be.
Right.
Because I tell everybody about Canva, but
Right.
they really do make it so easy to, like, I am not skilled in graphic design at all. I'm telling you right now, but just using one of the templates they already have and just
Right.
adding a quote to it in a way that like looks good to you. I mean, it was literally, I took maybe an hour and I made like 5 posters. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm really happy about it.
So then in addition to the things we've mentioned, of course, I think probably all know about Teachers Pay Teachers at this point. Brittany is on Teachers Pay Teachers along with so many other awesome teacher creators. And you can definitely spend money on Teachers Pay Teachers, but there's also other stuff.
Yeah, they have tons of freebies. A lot of different creators have different freebies. I know Brittany does. I love, as an English teacher, I love the Daring English Teacher. Most English teachers are probably familiar with her. She's kind of like an English teacher influencer, I guess. And she has a lot of great freebies and lesson plans that you can buy on there too. And you can also write reviews of the products after you've purchased them and earn credits that can apply to Teachers Pay Teachers. So you can essentially kind of continually fund part or all of your purchases through just writing reviews of other teachers' work. And it's great because you are putting that money into another hardworking teacher's pocket, which I love.
Oh, me too. And side note, I got a $100 gift card to Teachers Pay Teachers from Donors Choose.
Oh my gosh, it's like Christmas morning.
And now I'm like, ooh, I can buy all the things on my wish list. It's amazing.
Yeah. And there are lots of sales throughout the year. And if you follow the teachers that you love on Instagram, whether it be just because you already follow these teacher influencers on Instagram or because you found some of their stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers and started to follow them, they will let you know when there is a sale on their materials. And I do just want to add that I don't want anyone to share materials that they bought on Teachers Pay Teachers for free with their colleagues, because you really want to think of the teachers on the other side of the screen. They worked really hard to create those products and put them up, and they do deserve to be paid for their hard work and talent. So if somebody asks where you got something, just say, I got it on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I will forward you the link, because we don't want to take any money out of those teachers' pockets. They're doing us a great service.
And many times you can buy licenses at a discount in a group, like if your team wants one, you can get like 4 or 5 licenses at a discount. So that's another option to look for, but that can be awkward, because teachers will walk by and be like, ooh, can I get an original of that? And I'm like, yeah. And then if I bought it on Teachers Pay Teachers, I just say, oh, it's a Teachers Pay Teachers. I'll send you the link, and I have had to explain to my team that like, I really want to try and stick to that because yeah, exactly like what you said.
Totally. And then the next resource we want to talk about is Facebook Marketplace. I have one of my best friends who teaches at the same school with me. She was looking for flexible seating for her classrooms, and she found a ton of cheap or even sometimes free furniture on Facebook Marketplace. And she just picked it up and was able to have an awesome flexible seating situation that her students really loved. And they also have decor items. I mean, if you're looking for lamps or pictures or posters or artwork, they have all that kind of stuff too. And it's pretty simple. You just pick it up, pay for it, and then you've got it.
Yeah. And then another account I love following is We Are Teachers. They have a huge blog and an Instagram and a Facebook, and they will often share like seasonal freebies on Facebook that are a fun way to kind of spruce up things every once in a while. Like I remember one year I got these kindness quotes or compliment quotes where kids could like tear off a little piece on the bottom, like a little tab that gave them a compliment or said something kind. So following We Are Teachers can often get you some really cool freebies. And then of course there is the ubiquitous Amazon wish lists as another way to fill those gaps that a Donors Choose project might not get you access to.
Yeah, and there are a lot of other big companies that also offer teacher discounts. I know Michael's has a 15% teacher discount. I've gone there, I think, just to buy more white holiday lights. And we put a link to sign up for that 15% discount in the show notes if you're interested. I think you just need to sign up online first. And then I believe the Joann's app has teacher discounts as well.
Yeah, and they just have ridiculous discounts in general. That's where I
Yeah.
went to get all of my new fabric and a lot of the supplies when I redid my classroom a few years ago. And they give you like half off this and half off that. And by the time you're done, you're like, whoa. And then you apply your teacher discount on top of that. And it's pretty darn awesome.
Mm.
And then another thing that's big in Missoula, and I'm assuming it must be in other places too, to some degree, is there are a ton of local grants that you can get funded as an educator. So like our TV station does a grant. There's a couple local businesses that fund classrooms. Our PTA gives us grants. Our union gives us grants. If you literally do like a Google search for teacher grants in whatever town you live in, I bet there will be a few that pop up that, you write like a one-page project design, proposal, and you can get $250 or $500. So definitely check into local grants in your area.
And another tip I got from an Instagram follower was just use one color butcher paper on all of your decor or as backing for your posters or backing for your bulletin boards to make everything look cohesive and save that time, energy, and money, which I thought was a great tip. I use 2 different colors. I just do like my school's colors, and it's kind of just a way to keep it simple and keep it calm and not like visually overwhelming, and just like take off a little bit of the work on your end.
Yeah, and butcher paper is pretty easy on the budget because it's usually just stocked in our schools.
Yeah.
I have a teacher friend down the hall that uses party streamers as a border because they're inexpensive and they offer lots of color options. But again, she can keep it simple because sometimes, if there's too much pattern, it can just be distracting and overwhelming to our kiddos.
Yeah. And I also have the probably very unpopular teacher opinion that I really hate borders on bulletin boards.
No.
I do. I figured you'd like them.
Well, actually, you know what I do is I use ribbon. I use like a 1-inch straight ribbon.
Oh, that sounds
And it's just
pretty.
like a really nice clean line around the edge because I don't like the scalloped ones as much. I find they kind of take up space.
They take up a lot of space.
Yeah, I use a 1-inch ribbon and it's like covers up the edge of the fabric, but it's not distracting. And it's kind of like a black outline on things. Mine's not black, but it just finishes it off without making it too wild. But I definitely have loved borders in the past and never say never.
Yeah, you're like, I will convert you to borders, Rachel. I do like the ribbon idea. That sounds like a nice kind of like textural feel too, which is cool. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I just they're not for me. Another tip that we got is that you can use leftover paint on your bulletin boards instead of fabric. So if it's leftover paint from like a home project you did, you already know what the color is going to look like and that you love it. And then there are tons of local stores. I know that I use the Habitat for Humanity Restore a lot, like actually for like personal furniture and stuff, but they essentially sort of, I don't know if upcycling is the right word, but it's essentially sort of like thrifting old furniture, but also tools and paints. Like you can go buy half a gallon of paint. And Christy mentioned that she has one near her called Home Resource. And of course, thrifting is always an option too. So don't knock those things because you can find a lot of great furniture or decor for a really reduced price.
Yeah. And I would say at the same time, don't be tempted to buy it just because it's cheap. Like if you have that overall plan and design in your mind and your color palette, like I used Pinterest to create a color palette to find a color palette for my classroom when I upgraded things a while back. And so if it doesn't fall into that design plan, even if it's cheap, don't buy it. Keep looking for the things that really fit what you want. And, for me, I switched to using fabric pretty early on bulletin boards in my classroom just because the paper would fade and tear. And fabric was a colorful way that I could leave it up for year after year after year after year after year and not have to redo it as often. But then the idea of painting, again, I think you should ask first, but I was like, this is even cooler because paint doesn't snag, you don't have to cut paint, you just paint it and then you can, staple things on top of it. So I've never tried that, but I love that idea. And then one of the other awesome things that I love doing is, when you get a hardcover picture book, it comes with the paper book jacket. And those just get destroyed by children like immediately, unless they're covered with like the library plastic, which mine aren't. So I have cut triangles out of those covers of like the center of the covers and put them on just a piece of string or jute with like a hot glue gun and made like a really cool bunting, like one of those little triangle flag strings that I hang up in my classroom. And it's just a way to promote the books that we love and repurpose that artwork. It's a zero waste option that can really make your classroom really beautiful. If you have a space where you need to hang something that kids can look up and go, oh yeah, those are the books. We're surrounded by books. We must need to read, those. And it has been such a fun idea.
That is so cute. I love that idea. Okay, so let's close it out with a couple of the key points, and then we'll recap all of the resources that we listed, because we definitely tore through that like a hurricane.
There was a lot.
Yeah. So I think for me, and probably also for Christy, the biggest takeaway and the biggest sort of thing to keep in mind is that you want to be extremely intentional about the space you're setting up. And like Christy said, don't just buy something because it's the cheapest thing. Try to keep in mind that color palette or that theme that you're going with, but just be very, very intentional and keep it simple at first, and make sure that everything that you're doing is either going to be meaningful for you and your students, or just create that really nice, safe, calm, and effective learning environment.
Yeah. And a great example of that for me is I don't have a couch in my room. As much as I might want a couch or beanbag chairs or things like that, it just would make the traffic flow really funky, and so don't force something because you want it. If it's not going to work for your kiddos, you might have to make some of those trade-offs and just think your priorities are the learning and the emotional environment you're creating for your students. And if it doesn't serve that, then it might need to wait, or just not have it. I don't have it in my room. And so create something that works for you. Don't get sucked into comparing your classroom space to the gorgeousness that you see down the hall or on Pinterest or on Instagram. Those are awesome, awesome teachers to use as resources for inspiration. And then you craft something that's reasonable for you and your students. You can be a phenomenally effective teacher without a mansion of a classroom that is worthy of the cover of a magazine, right? It just has to be something that works for you and your students. So don't fall into that comparison trap.
Yes. And remember that it does not all have to be perfect, picture Pinterest perfect before that first day of school. You can change your classroom as the year goes on, and you can spread out purchases that you really want to have for your classroom and add things as the school year goes on. It does not have to be completely perfect the second the first student sits in their chair.
Yeah, they certainly won't know the difference.
Nope.
At all. They will have no idea. And then as your career goes on too, obviously it's going to evolve and change. And for me, 15 years in, 16 years in, I kind of did a whole reboot because I had the time and energy and I had the inspiration. Up until that point, I was busy focusing on other parts of teaching. And so allow yourself that space to put it on the back burner and have it be functional, but it's not something you have to spend a ton of time on all the time. But then you might find yourself in a year going, poof, I need some new colors in this classroom. I'm sick of looking at all this stuff on the walls, And along those lines, stick to your budget. That's kind of the whole purpose of this episode. And maybe you need a classroom budget sinking fund to help you track your classroom expenses and save up for some big things that you're interested in getting. So if it is something that you are finding you're spending a lot of money on that you're not getting reimbursed for, good old sinking fund could come in super handy.
Totally. So let's recap all of the many, many resources and ideas that we threw at you in this episode.
Yeah. So first and foremost, Donors Choose. Awesome starting place. You might be able to spend $0, which what could be better? And then there's freebies on Teachers Pay Teachers. There's Brittany's blog. If you just search the superhero teacher, she'll come up, but we'll also link it in the show notes. And then there's We Are Teachers for freebies. Look for grants in your local area, get to those thrift stores, and then be like Rachel, get crafty. Use discount codes and the materials you have on hand to make whatever you need.
Yeah, beautifully put. Thank you guys so much for joining us here. Remember that if you have a comment or if you would like to share another resource with us, send us an email at teacherstalkmoney@gmail.com.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for being here, and we hope you got some great ideas. Tag us on Instagram so we can see them.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining us here on Teachers Talk Money.
Subscribe now to make sure you don't miss a future episode.
Leave us a review of this podcast. It helps more teachers find us.
Share it with a teacher friend who can use some of this information.
You can find more money advice from Christy at Financially Fit Teacher on Instagram and Rachel at Teachers Talk Money on Instagram and YouTube.
All opinions are our own, and our awesome theme music is by John Bartman.